We're 3 weeks in. Let's discuss the state of Syracuse football.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer. Thank you for making us your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day, and we are always free and available wherever you get your podcasts, whether you're watching Locked On Syracuse right now on YouTube or you're listening on your favorite audio platform. On today's show, is it more or less likely 3 weeks into the season that Syracuse can pull off some road upsets? We'll talk about that later on in the show. Plus, the defense for Syracuse has two big questions heading into conference play. But first, we got to talk about this offense because through 3 weeks, it looks pretty similar to how it did last year. We'll talk about all that and more here on today's edition of Locked On Syracuse. And before we get to everything, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the app today. Syracuse football through 3 weeks this season, which is 1/4 of the regular season, is sitting at 2-1. And I think for the most part, we all kind of expected that the Orange were going to be 2-1. Sure, we were hoping that Syracuse was going to upset Tennessee, but at the end of the day, Tennessee is proving to be a pretty good team in college football. I know that they blew the game against Georgia, but still they were right there with Georgia the entire time. Should have won that game. Tennessee is a really good team, clearly better than Syracuse, so the Orange lost to them in week 1. Then in week 2, Syracuse avoided the trap by having a comeback against UConn, so they got to 1-1. And then on Friday night, Syracuse beat up on an FCS opponent in Colgate 66-24. So let's go over some of the takeaways here, okay? And first and foremost, let's get to the offense. What do you guys think of the offense 1/4 of the way through the season? Comment your thoughts right now in the comment section below. So Fran Brown, head coach of Syracuse, at his ACC Media Day press conference, told the world that the offense from 2024 was not going to change in 2025, meaning schematically, they were going to run the same system. It's a system that's designed with its short passing game. It goes fast. They run a lot of plays. They usually eat up time of possession. And through 3 games, it's safe to say that Fran Brown is not lying about that. This is a pretty similar offense to what we saw in 2024. Let's go over the output, though, because at the end of the day, this is a results business. What do the stats say about Syracuse from last year to this year? Well, in 2024, keep in mind, they played 13 games and we're only 3 games into 2025. But in 2024, they averaged about 34 points per game, about 470 total yards per game, and about 370 passing yards per game. Now to 2025, which is this season, Syracuse on offense is averaging nearly 40 points per game, thanks in large part to, that 60-plus point effort against Colgate. Total yards, 486 per game. Passing yards, 379 per game. You could argue that those numbers are inflated because they played Colgate in week 3. And if you go back to last season, Syracuse, when they played Holy Cross, did not dominate Holy Cross like they dominated Colgate this year. But even if you take away the Colgate game of 2025, the one that just happened on Friday night, Syracuse's offense in week 1 versus Tennessee, week 2 versus UConn, averaged 420 yards a game. So it was still an elite offense in terms of total yards in the first 2 weeks of the season, independent of the Colgate game. And there are plenty of similarities here. First, they love to spread the ball around. 14 players for Syracuse have caught at least one pass this season, You compare that to 2025, Syracuse had 16 different players who caught a pass. And I think Syracuse in this season is going to surpass that. The running back, Yassine Willis, I do not believe has made a catch yet. So I think over the course of the next couple of months, he will get at least one catch. And also Emmanuel Ross, when he gets healthy and back on the field, I would expect that he's going to record at least one catch this season. Well, there you go. You're at 16. 7 different Syracuse players have caught at least 7 passes through 3 games. You got, in order, Dan Villari, who leads the team in catches, Daryl Gill, Jonte Cook, Justice Ross Simmons, who'd have more catches if not exiting Friday night's game early with a finger injury, Tyshawn Russell, Will Nixon, the running back, and Jalen Hornsby, a young wide receiver. And spreading the ball around does 2 different things that are both positive. First, it keeps everyone happy. It keeps everyone involved in the offense, which is always good. It's always nice that everyone's feeling confident, feeling like when they come in the game, they're actually going to be able to contribute on offense and help the team win. Number 2, opposing defenses, when they play against Syracuse, at least what they've shown through 3 weeks, and also what they showed in 2024, cannot just lock in on one guy. Because let's say you want to double team Daryl Gill deep, right? Because Daryl Gill's averaging about 20 yards per catch right now. He has shown the ability to stretch the field. You want to put a safety over the top for him, that's fine, but then you're going to leave someone else one-on-one, whether it's Jonte Cook or Justice Ross Simmons. With that being said, you spread the ball around. You can't just focus in on one guy when you're playing against a team like Syracuse. And hey, you want to take away someone else? Well, then there's Dan Villari, right? Dan Villari has shown massive improvement this season compared to his other seasons at Syracuse and also when he was at Michigan. Another similarity, and this is really fun, we're only 3 games in. Steve Angeli leads the nation in passing yards. Remember how in the offseason, how I was explaining to you all how, yeah, last year was amazing, but it's very unlikely that Syracuse is going to be able to match its offensive output from a year ago, particularly in the passing game. Kyle McCord led the nation in passing yards. How on earth are they going to be able to do something like that again? We're only 3 weeks in, so I'm not going to sit here and say they're going to continue to do this. But Steve Angeli leads the nation in passing yards right now. And he is so fascinating as a quarterback because here are his numbers through 3 games. 64% completion percentage, well over 1,000 passing yards, 8 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. If you extrapolate that to a 12-game season, his numbers would be this. About 4,300 passing yards, 32 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. For context, here were Kyle McCord's numbers last year. 13 games, 66% completion percentage, about 4,800 passing yards, which was an ACC record, 34 touchdowns to 12 interceptions. But as great as the numbers appear to be for Steve Angeli, and as a numbers guy, I cannot deny how great the numbers look for Steve Angeli so far, I still think that the jury is still out on Steve Angeli. I thought he performed better in the Tennessee game than the numbers would suggest. And then you fast forward to the UConn game the following week. I thought his numbers say that he played better than in reality of how he performed against UConn. But to his credit, he was sensational at the end of that game in leading Syracuse to a comeback. And then he dominates Tollgate, where he was essentially flawless. Over 400 yards, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, hardly any turnover-worthy throws, had a very high passer rating in that game. He was phenomenal, but it was Tollgate, right? At minimum, I think Steve Angeli through 3 weeks has shown that he is at least an above-average quarterback in the ACC. And forget the ACC, in the nation. He is at least an above-average starting quarterback. That I can definitively conclude about him through 3 games. And if he keeps this pace up, 32 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, over 4,000 yards, he's going to be all ACC. That's bound to happen, and it's amazing because he's got another year of college eligibility, right? But at minimum, I would say honorable mention for now with Steve Angeli. The jury is still out on him. I want to see how he performs in ACC play and against Notre Dame, which is their one non-conference game left. So what's the conclusion about this offense? So far, through 3 games, it looks very, very similar to how it did in 2024. And what I do know is this also, Jeff Nixon, we talked about this in the offseason, has a track record as an offensive coordinator of year over year producing really good offenses. We talked about his tenure at Baylor, where it seemed like every single year he was there, they had a good offense. So last year, as the OC, he was able to produce a great Syracuse offense. And so far through 3 games this year, it has been a very, very good Syracuse offense as well. And if he can maintain this pace, Syracuse might have to give him another contract extension. That's right, another one, because Jeff Nixon last year got himself a contract extension. He might need another one in order to keep him around for another year or 2. Comment your thoughts in the comments section below. What do you think of the Syracuse offense through 3 games? Do you have any concerns about the Syracuse offense through 3 games? And what do you want to see from this offense in ACC play? I'd love your thoughts in the comments section below. So the offense is good. The special teams have been great through 3 games. Ricky Brumfield, shout out to him. He has turned around the special teams in 3 games. The defense, though, has a lot of questions, and we'll get to them in the next segment here on Locked On Syracuse. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5-hour energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee plus B vitamins and nutrients with 0 sugar and 0 crashes. What I love most is how portable they are. Big taste, tiny shot. You can take it anywhere and get that boost when you need it. And honestly, I love how fast it kicks in and that it's sugar-free, so I don't have to worry about crashing later. Enough with boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5-hour energy shots. Get the favorites you love or be bold and try something new in-store and online at www.5hourenergy.com or Amazon today. We're 3 games into the regular season, and doesn't it sort of feel like with Syracuse, we're watching a pretty similar team compared to last year, just with entirely different personnel? The offense is really good, just like it was in 2024. The special teams have actually been upgraded significantly. That's a nice change. But the defense is still a massive question mark for this team in 2025. Syracuse right now through 3 games allows nearly 440 total yards per game. And that's including the Colgate performance where they allowed over 400 total yards. That is the second worst in the ACC. They are only ahead of Virginia Tech, a team that just fired their head coach in Brent Pry, and thank goodness they fired Brent Pry because he stinks, quite frankly, and Virginia Tech is a proud program that deserves to be a lot better than what they are. You'll hear that. You'll hear more about that and my takes on that in ACC Squad this week. But that's it with Syracuse right now on defense. They are only ahead of a team that currently does not have a head coach. I'm recording this at 3:16 p.m. Eastern on Monday, September 15th. Maybe that changes with Virginia Tech in the near future. But for now, they don't seem to have a head coach because they just fired one. So what are the concerns with the Syracuse defense? And feel free to comment right now in the comments section below your concerns about the Syracuse defense, or if you're not concerned at all with this Syracuse defense. I have 2 of them. The first one is the pass rush of Syracuse football, or really what I should say is lack thereof with pass rush. Last year, Syracuse football had one player who could consistently get to the quarterback. And that was Fidel Diggs, who had a career season with 7.5 sacks, and he parlayed that into being a 7th-round NFL draft pick. He was really good for Syracuse football, arguably the Orange's best defender a year ago, but now he's in the National Football League. He's not there. And so now this season, Syracuse football has 0 players, quite frankly, that can consistently get to the quarterback. They have 3 players this year who have recorded a sack, and each of these players have just 1 sack through 3 games. Are you ready for these 3 players? You got Raheem Long, who is a defensive back. You got Jamie Tremble, a converted tight end, who did play some linebacker in high school too, should mention that. And Kevin Jobity. Okay, he's an actual defensive lineman. Where's David Reese? Where is George Rooks? Where's David O? I do not know. Where's Dennis Jaquez? Where is the pass rush of Syracuse football right now? Because look, we're going to talk about Clemson starting tomorrow. And I know they're down right now. I know they're struggling right now. And I know that their quarterback, and Cade Klubnik in particular, seems off to start the season. That being said, they are still the Clemson Tigers. Cade Klubnik last year had a Heisman caliber season, and many people were expecting that he could have another Heisman caliber season in 2025. If Syracuse football cannot get in Cade Klubnik's face on Saturday, do you really think they're going to have much of a chance at an upset? Don't let the game on Saturday be the game where Cade Klubnik finally gets hot for Clemson and could potentially turn their entire season around. This pass rush has got to step up, and it has to start on Saturday at noon against Clemson. And I know that Syracuse's pass defense statistically is not great, but I think a lot of that is because these quarterbacks, they have a ton of time. And when you give Division I quarterbacks time to throw the football and to make plays, well, guess what? There are Division I football players for a reason. They're going to make plays. This pass rush has got to be better, or else Syracuse is in trouble on defense. There's no Fidel Diggs to bail him out now. It's on the current personnel. Number 2, stopping the run for Syracuse football. That has been Syracuse's bugaboo over the past couple of seasons. So, yeah, you can't really get to the quarterback, and you can't really stop the run. So far through 3 games, Syracuse has allowed 165 rush yards per game. That is only ahead of Virginia Tech in the ACC. It's not good company. And all 3 of Syracuse's opponents this season, Tennessee, UConn, Colgate, they have each gained at least 100 yards on the ground against Syracuse. It's one thing when Tennessee goes crazy with their ground game against Syracuse. It's another thing when you have UConn, who I think in that game ran for 165 yards. And you have Colgate running for over 100 yards. The run defense hasn't particularly been good either. And in the Elijah Robinson era, who is the defensive coordinator of Syracuse, he arrived same year as Fran Brown. Fran Brown got to Syracuse. He hired Jeff Nixon as the offensive coordinator, and his defensive coordinator hire was Elijah Robinson. Syracuse has had a ton of issues in trying to stop the run. Very rarely have they actually been able to stop it. More often than not, it's can they at least contain it? Because only twice through now 16 games in the Elijah Robinson era has Syracuse held a team under 100 yards rushing. Those teams, last year versus Holy Cross, an FCS opponent, and Pitt, surprisingly, was held under 100 yards last year. But if you remember that game, you remember it being a complete annihilation, and we don't really need to talk about that game anymore. Those are the only 2 games. Most of the time, it's just hope they can contain the run, not stop it. And ironically, the best run defense performance by Syracuse in the 16 games in the Elijah Robinson era was against a team who could probably run for 300 yards tomorrow against this Syracuse run defense. And the Syracuse run defense of last year, Georgia Tech, week 2 of last year, that was a phenomenal performance by this defensive line and these linebackers. I get different personnel, but it's the same issue as what it was last year with stopping the run. Ironically, the Georgia Tech team was their best performance. Maybe they can step up when they play Georgia Tech this year, although it won't be particularly easy. Of course, there are also fundamentals that bleed into some of the larger issues with Syracuse's defense right now. Tackling is a big concern. I don't love Elijah Robinson's play calling a lot, particularly on 3rd and long situations. Why he continues to rush 3 and drop 8 in coverage, I don't know. It has very rarely worked since he has gotten here. But at the end of the day, if your team and your personnel can't get to the quarterback and they also have trouble stopping the run, it's very, very difficult to have a good defense. And so for Saturday and for the rest of the ACC slate, this defense is going to have to be better than what we have seen through 3 games this season. Comment your thoughts in the comments section below. How do you want to see this Syracuse defense improve? And do you think it'll improve this year? Comment in the comment section below. Now, coming up, are upsets more or less likely for Syracuse now? We'll explain more next on Locked On Syracuse. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right means cashing in. With football back, Prize Picks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes all in less than 60 seconds. And the best part is, even if one of your picks misses, Prize Picks invented the flex play so you can still double your money. That's right. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 in lineups after you play your first $5. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. I was actually at the New York Jets game yesterday with a buddy of mine, and guess what? He bet on the Buffalo Bills, and so he's happy that the Buffalo Bills covered the spread against the New York Jets because, of course, they did. The New York Jets are not a good football team. Are you ready to play? Are you ready to make money on the New York Jets losing football games this year? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Remember the Syracuse football offseason? There were 2 big storylines. The first storyline for Syracuse was who was going to be their starting quarterback. Was it going to be Steve Angeli? Was it going to be Ricky Collins? Was it going to be some upset? A young quarterback perhaps steps up and takes the reins. I don't know. Maybe. Fran Brown's always going to play the player that gives his team the best chance of winning, right? The second big storyline for Syracuse this offseason was the schedule. And oh my goodness, how brutal the schedule was for Syracuse in 2025. Poor Syracuse. They just had this great season. They want to capitalize on it. Fran Brown's moving the team in the right direction, but oh my goodness, the schedule makers did Syracuse no favors in 2025. They're playing all these teams that were in the college football playoff a year ago. They're also playing good teams like Miami and Georgia Tech, and they don't have any real layups on their schedule aside from Colgate and maybe UConn, which turned out to not really be so much of a layup for Syracuse, right? That was one of the big storylines. How are they going to navigate this difficult schedule? And what I was saying throughout the offseason was if they're a good team, they'll find a way to beat good teams because that's what good teams do. They can find a way to beat other good teams, which leads me into this. Are upsets more or less likely for Syracuse after 3 weeks of this college football season? This goes for Syracuse along with all of their competition. And let's evaluate the first 3 opponents for Syracuse. First up, you got Tennessee. Clearly a strong team. Hung with Georgia, should have beaten Georgia. They were better than Syracuse football on that day, and they are still better than Syracuse football. They're a great team. Josh Heupel was a great coach. Joey Aguilar is one of the best quarterbacks in the country, which I did not see coming going into the year, but he looks the part right now. UConn, an improving program until they just lost to Delaware. Delaware, who I believe just picked up their first FBS win as a program. Shout out to Delaware if that's true. I think I read that online correctly. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Apologies if I'm wrong on that. But remember how Syracuse last year inexplicably lost to Stanford in week 3? See, that's the optimistic way of looking at the UConn game now if you're Syracuse. Maybe they were just really, really bad that day. And, well, they did not perform well in that game until the very, very end. And there's a reason why Fran Brown had that team running sprints, not really sprints, but had that team jogging after the game. So who knows about UConn? They're better than they used to be, but they're still not very good. And Syracuse, hopefully it's the opposite of what happened against Stanford where they lost. And this year they found a way to win that game instead of inexplicably losing it. And then you got Colgate, who's an FCS opponent, and there's not really much you can take away from that. Now, let's evaluate the underdogs for Syracuse. They are most likely going to be an underdog in all of their road games this season. We already know one of them at Clemson as of this morning, Monday, September 15th. I checked FanDuel, and Syracuse was a 17.5-point underdog for Saturday's noon game against Clemson. So we know they're going to be underdogs for that. At SMU, most likely a dog. Georgia Tech on the road, yep, that's a dog. At Miami, dog. At Notre Dame, definitely a dog as well. Unless Syracuse football runs the table with its home schedule, which we'll get to in a moment, and they definitely have a chance to do that, they're going to need to find a way to win one of these road games at minimum to make a bowl. So, is an upset now more or less likely? The game that I'm eyeing is at SMU. I think that's a winnable game now for Syracuse football. They have not looked particularly great through 3 games. 2 of the 3, they've looked very unimpressive. They were not good against Missouri State. They were not good against East Texas A&M. And they blew a game against Baylor at home that they shouldn't have blown. Is Baylor a good team this year? Maybe, but I don't know. When they lost that game at home, they don't seem to have the same magic like they did last year when they made the college football playoff. SMU, I think, is still a good team. I think SMU will at least make a bowl and have a strong record. But if they go 8-4 this year, that means they're going to lose 3 more games. And if you're Syracuse, why can't you beat one of those teams? Why can't you beat one of the 4 losses of SMU this year? I think you can beat them. I'm also not going to give up on a potential Georgia Tech upset. And Georgia Tech looks great. They beat Clemson. Great game, back and forth. It's a tough matchup for Syracuse already because of how Georgia Tech plays and how physical they are and how much they love to run the football. And we just talked about in the previous segment how Syracuse has trouble stopping the run. But I'm not going to give up on that potential upset just yet, and here's why. Georgia Tech over the past couple of seasons has proven that they can hang with pretty much anyone in the country. Doesn't really matter the team. We all remember the very end of last regular season when they nearly completely changed the complexion of the college football playoff by almost beating Georgia in their building. Remember that game? They almost did it. It took 8 overtimes for Georgia to win that game and a miracle comeback in the 4th quarter to even get it to overtime. They can hang with anyone. They beat Clemson this weekend. I still think Clemson, by the way, is a good team. But they can lose. They can lose to other teams. The jury is still out whether or not Georgia Tech is truly going to have one of those years where they go 10-1 up until their matchup against Georgia, or maybe even 11-0. But for now, I'm not going to give up on a potential upset for Syracuse in that game, although it'll be very difficult to win it. As far as Miami and Notre Dame is barely inside the top 25. Miami is one of the 5 best teams in the country in the latest AP poll. The funny part is that those two teams played against each other, and it was a very, very close finish. Miami was the better team really from start to finish, but that game turned into a nail-biter at the very end. I still think Notre Dame is really good, despite them being 0-2 right now, and Miami seems to be the team to beat right now in the ACC. So those games are obviously going to be very challenging if you're Syracuse. What is there to take away from all of this, you may ask? Well, 3 of those 5 teams on the road are underachieving right now. You got Clemson, Notre Dame, and SMU. They're underachieving. Those are 3 teams that going into the year either expected to not only be in the college football playoff, but in the national title conversation, talking about Clemson and Notre Dame, and SMU trying to get back to the college football playoff like they did in 2024. They've all underachieved so far this season. Miami and Georgia Tech, they are either overachieving right now or they might just be really good. Jury is still out. We're only 3 games into the season. Bottom line is, based on how the first 3 weeks have unfolded and looking at the opponents on Syracuse's schedule, I think it's a little bit more likely now that they can pull off an upset against these teams than it was going into the preseason. Having said that, it won't matter if Syracuse football itself does not perform. If they don't perform, who cares about how these teams are playing? Because they'll lose. These are still teams that have, on paper, more talent than Syracuse football. So if Syracuse does not bring its A game in these games, they won't win. And they're on the road in all of them. But I do think that if Syracuse can perform up to its potential, an upset, or maybe even 2 upsets, is more likely than it was in the beginning of the season. As far as the home schedule for Syracuse football, glad you asked. You got Duke, Pitt, North Carolina, and Boston College. Hey, Syracuse, you are allowed to go 4-0. I will take 3-1. 3-1 is nice. You're allowed to go 4-0 with that home slate. Just saying. Just want to put it on record. You are allowed to run the table at home and not have to worry about winning a single road game in order to qualify for a bowl in 2025. Let's just go through it. Duke, that's a beatable team. Pitt, they just blew it versus West Virginia. They're a beatable team. North Carolina, I mean, congrats on beating Charlotte and who was it, Richmond? We still remember what happened in the season opener against TCU. Don't forget, that's a beatable team. And you got Boston College to close the season. They just lost to Stanford. That's a beatable team. So again, Syracuse fans, maybe you feel differently. I'll take 3-1. But you're allowed to go 4-0 in that home slate. Just saying. If you're a good team, Syracuse, you can run the table with that home stretch. This is why ultimately I still feel confident that Syracuse is going to make a bowl in 2025. Because who else do you trust right now? Who do you trust? You may not trust Syracuse, and that's totally fine. I don't entirely trust Syracuse either. And it's definitely within the realm of possibility that this team does not make a bowl. And I would be disappointed if they don't make a bowl. And you probably also feel disappointed if they don't make a bowl. But who else do you trust? Do you trust that Clemson's going to turn it around? They might. Do you trust that Miami's going to maintain their level of play? They might. What about Georgia Tech? They might do it. Is SMU going to do the same thing they did last year where they lose early in the season and then not lose again until the ACC title game? Maybe. Or Notre Dame, or maybe Duke gets hot. I don't know. Who else do you trust on Syracuse's schedule? That Syracuse will be unable to win 6 regular season games, or really just 4 more games from here on out. Comment your thoughts in the comment section below. I'm fascinated to what you all have to say about that. Now, as far as what's coming up on Locked On Syracuse here in the near future, tomorrow we're going to start prepping for Clemson. That's right, just a general team overview of the Clemson Tigers. Very difficult game for Syracuse this week. Also working on setting up a date to do a Locked On crossover podcast with the host of Locked On Clemson Tigers, Morgan Thomas. So all that and more coming up on Locked On Syracuse in the near future. It's another big moment here on Locked On. College football fans, Locked On and Fire TV present College Football Kickoff, your ultimate college football weekly preview. Trey Toll of Locked On Big 12 leads the conversation alongside 2-time AP Coach of the Year, Gary Patterson, former college star Jesse Holley, and Locked On's local experts. A college football preview only Locked On can do. Catch College Football Kickoff every Thursday throughout the season, only on Fire TV. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe. Tell all your friends about Locked On Syracuse. I'll see you all again soon.